Seated. And welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification class. All right, I hope everyone's doing well today. Another hot day in Texas as we go through another hot topic in character development. Now, I hope that you were able to tune in, if you were watching online, to the last class that we had with our teacher, David, who was, of course, we are in, just in case you're wondering, we are in the acceptance unit of the Peaceful Solution, which is unit number 2. We are still in chapter 1, but we're in unit 2 of the intermediate series. And of course, as it's been said before, if you are joining and you don't have a book, they are available online. You can just click on the tab on our Facebook page there and pull the drop-down menu, so that's right next to the character unit, and you can pull up the other book, which is what we're in right now. And as we move forward in the classes, the other books will be added. So in case you're wondering where they all are, don't get too excited. They're there. They're going to be coming, but we're going to move through this one step at a time. So anyway, David was covering pages 10 and 11, 10 through 12 in the previous class. And we're going to just kind of pick up a little bit from where he left off. And I want you to keep in mind the things that he covered, because what we're going to be talking about today is going to be moving into the acceptance of others, okay? And that's what this chapter is entitled, Accepting You, Accepting Me. And as we mentioned before, as I've mentioned before, as the previous teachers have mentioned before, it's important to understand in regards to building a positive character that it's not just about us, right? It's not just about what we do for ourselves, because we have an integral part to play within society. And everybody does, irregardless of what their character is. Only thing that their character determines it'll determine if they have a positive or beneficial part to play in society or a negative part to play in society. Well, our goal here is to train our students, to train ourselves, to be trained, how to change these negative character traits within ourselves so that we can become a beneficial part of society. And of course, some of the things that he was covering last class was in dealing with some of these cold, hard facts and talking a little bit about knowledge is power. Just went back and he talked about a little bit of that. William did as well in his class, and talking about some of these things that people get into and they abuse. Teenagers get into and they start abusing certain drugs and alcohol and things like that abuse their body. Which in effect affects their mind, because these things that abuse the body now, and a lot of times young people don't think about this, but when you start getting into the damaging of organs, liver, I think the liver is responsible for over 500 plus different functions within the human body. Okay, from the production of certain hormones to the cleansing of the blood to the regulating of certain processes in the body. The liver is very important. It's so important, in fact, that it is one of the only organs in your body that can actually regenerate itself. Okay, that's how important it is, and so it's necessary for people to understand and to value their health by not doing things that will take away from what their bodies were designed to do. And of course, health is very important, because if our bodies are not healthy, well, that's going to eventually lead to our minds not being healthy, right? You think about with the abuse of alcohol, and alcohol is kind of a smaller cell, so to speak, molecular structure than water is per se. And so, part of what it does is it depletes the mind of oxygen. Okay, it depletes the blood of oxygen. This is why they can do what they call blood alcohol, I think concentration, BAC, I think test, and they can have a person blow into a breathalyzer unit to determine how much alcohol they have in their blood. Well, it's something obviously that can be breathed out, right? And so when that gets into the system, the bloodstream, it starts to affect, as the previous teachers covered, it's not just alcohol, that's just one of the different things that a person can put into their body, but it starts to impair their ability to make right choices. Even if a person has somewhat of an ability to make the choice, it impairs their body's ability to carry that choice out speedily, okay? In the case of somebody driving, right, or not even driving, just something as simple as walking, right? If they're impaired from some type of a drug or from type of alcohol, well, their ability to carry out a simple task such as walking, or if you trip and you can kind of catch yourself, they don't catch themselves, they let the ground catch them, right? That's what they consider their best friend, because it's always there to catch them when they fall. But, all these things impair a person's ability, their physical functions, and what we're concerned about here and what we're covering is how it impairs your ability to make decisions, your mental functions, because that's very important. When we get over to page 11, which was talked about too, in regards to knowledge is power, well, you have to have a mind that's healthy enough to receive and understand, process, and apply the knowledge that you get in order to make a right choice. Okay, so that's why it's important that these facts are brought out to the students to help them to understand, how they can actually put things in their body that can not only affect their body, and even some of these things talk about how it affects the brain, right, and shortens the lifespan, but how, in effect, that will affect their ability to reason, to make decisions, to understand the long-term consequences of their decisions, because decisions we make today, the consequences of those decisions don't necessarily end with the day. It doesn't end with the setting of the sun, or a person who drinks too much alcohol, then they'll, the police, if they're arrested for public intoxication, they'll throw them in the drunk tank and they'll have them sleep it off, as the alcohol dissipates and is flushed out of the system. Well, you can't just sleep off a bad choice. You can't just wake up in the morning and the consequence of your bad decision when you were impaired, or you made a risk-taking decision, or you made an impulsive choice, those things just don't go away, the next day. And so it's important for them to understand about the decisions that they make and what influences those decisions, and really to value themselves enough to where they see that their life has value, that they have, that they're an important part of society, even if they don't know fully what it is they want to do, or even if they don't know fully what part they play in society. That doesn't take away from their relevance. It doesn't take away from the student's ability to contribute in some way. Remember some of the positive leaders that we covered in the character unit. I'm sure that those young men and women, when they were 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and maybe even when they were teenagers, they probably didn't have any idea of how the things that they pushed for, the goals that they strove for, that eventually made a global impact. I bet you they had no idea of what those things were going to end up leading to, right? But over time, those desires, those values developed, and they were nurtured, and their character was supported. And it led them to making some positive choices that essentially led to some very, very beneficial things that impacted a lot of countries, and of course, even globally. So, a person might not know what will lie ahead of them in their future, when they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. But one thing they can rest assured is that if they learn and develop a positive character and maintain that positive character, they can be sure that their impact will be positive. And that's the thing that we want to get them to understand, because they don't have it all figured out. We as adults don't even have it all figured out, right? We're still in the process of learning, and we're always going to be continuously learning throughout our life. And we should actually crave and hunger knowledge, right? And crave and hunger the desire to improve our character, to improve our worth, our benefit to society. And the Peaceful Solution is an excellent tool that will enable us to do that, because it will help us to look, I think the word is introspectively. to look inwards, to our own character and examine ourselves continuously to see where are places that we need to make improvement, okay? And this is something that can be a very valuable asset to a young person, because most of the time, I remember when I was younger, I didn't really think about what I needed to do to improve myself. If anything, I wanted to do to improve myself, I just wanted to be faster than the guy that I was racing, right? Or faster than the person that was throwing the ball at me, or better at this activity or sport or whatever. It wasn't the improvement of my character. I didn't start valuing that until when I got a lot older, and I started to realize that being the fastest on a race course is not going to help you in life. It's not going to help you in getting jobs and maintaining jobs and forming beneficial, healthy relationships with others, right? That comes from character. And so, part of these things, they all tie into what we've been covering here in acceptance, because a person has to accept and value the beneficial characteristics that they have within themselves. They have to recognize those things first, right? And like we've said in the past, sometimes people grow up in an environment, in a family, in a home where there is a lot of dysfunction, where there is a lot of physical, mental, emotional, and sometimes sexual abuse that takes place, which takes that person's, it actually robs their worth, their value away from them. Now, does that mean it's not there? No. It just means that the person has to be led back to understanding that they do have value, right? And so this is the very beneficial thing, the very beneficial power, the very great influence that a parent or teacher has on their students, right? It's like they can kind of be that person, that influence in the child's life to open their eyes and to help them to see clearly again in a muddy, murky, dusty world. It was interesting. I was looking at, they were showing some before and after pictures in some of the world's most polluted cities, the most populous polluted cities. And there were some of the cities that were out in some of the Asian continents that they have hundreds of millions of people, billions of people that live in those countries, tens of millions of people that are concentrated in certain cities. And they took some pictures before COVID-19 came into the picture. And the normal everyday picture of that skyline of the city was the city didn't have a skyline. When you looked up, all you saw was dust. And then they took some pictures about the same time a year later when there were all the lockdowns instituted, travel restrictions were imposed and so forth. And it was actually a clear, beautiful sky. I think some people in those areas actually were able to see clouds and stars and the sun for the first time, right? And so, that's kind of what a teacher does. They kind of remove all of that dust. They remove all that haze. They remove all that murkiness from the negative things that life brings into a person's life, and helps them to see clearly, to realize that, hey, there is a big, beautiful world out here. There is a lot that I can do to improve myself and to improve society, and I want to learn everything that I can. And that's very important. Never underestimate the effect that you have as you're training to be teachers on your students. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a student in a classroom. It could just be somebody that you're having a conversation with randomly, talking about the peaceful solution, or they might be expressing how they had a bad day, and here you come giving a positive, taking those lemons and turning it into lemonade, or helping them see that they can do the same thing, and give them words of encouragement and help them realize that, what, I can do something to make a difference. Okay, so never take that for granted. So we're going to look back to, let me see here, let's look back, let me just check my, let's look back to page 12, because this is going to tie into what we're going to be covering today on page 13. Under When Life Hands You Lemons, and we're going to look at that first paragraph. Now, this was already read. I just want to go back and reread this, as this, like I said, it ties back into what we're going to be covering today on page 13, in accepting others. But it gives you this here, lays this foundation here, if you're really reading and looking at it, to what we're going to be covering on page 13. It says, people are faced with challenges, setbacks, and disappointments every day. Okay, every day there are challenges, setbacks, and disappointments. Now, not necessarily do those challenges, setbacks, and disappointments always have to imply a negative thing, right? It does not necessarily have to be the overwhelming part of a person's day. I, in fact, like an occasional challenge, right? It enables me to strengthen and to sharpen my mind, or to improve my ability to solve problems, right? So I do like an occasional problem. I don't like them bombarding me 24 hours a day, but I do like the opportunity to improve and sharpen my wits, because it lets me see where I need to make improvements, where I'm weak at, right? And how I can take what I've learned in the peaceful solution and use it to sharpen the tip of it, so to speak, or to wet the blade like they do on the strap of with the razor. So it says these adversities can come from a variety of sources. That word adversities simply means a very difficult or unfavorable situation, okay? And it doesn't necessarily have to mean a person, right? Although sometimes people can be adversarial, or they can be very difficult in their interacting with other people, but sometimes it can just be a situation or a set of circumstances that can make it very difficult, right? You're planning to get to work, and you're having a great day, and all of a sudden, you run into a traffic jam or an accident on the road, or road construction, or you get a flat tire, right? That's a difficult circumstance. And now you have to get out of your car, and now you're going to be late for work and things like that. So it could just be some of these setbacks. And if you remember, back in page 79 of your character unit, and if you don't have it, you can just write it down there. We talk about those very things, because it's important that we understand this. It says these adversities come from a variety of sources. People are faced with challenges, setbacks, and disappointments every day. And we learned that in the character unit on page 79 when we talked in chapter 4 in regards to character, the chapter on character, now that I have it, how do I keep it, right? So talking about maintaining our positive character traits that we have learned and will continue to learn thus far. And the first paragraph, on page 79, it says, in the previous chapter, you learned that obtaining a positive character involves what you value, who you imitate, and your willingness to practice positive behavior. Now that you know the basic steps to obtaining a positive character, the question is, how do you maintain it? To maintain your character, you must constantly make choices that are respectful and compassionate towards yourself and others. You see, so it includes not just the person who is learning to develop the positive character, but towards ourselves and others. And this is what we're talking about here in dealing with the acceptance of ourselves in the acceptance unit here, the acceptance of ourselves and the acceptance of others. The next paragraph says, maintaining your positive character means protecting and guarding yourself from influences and choices that could lead to developing negative character traits. Maintaining your character must be done on a daily basis, and sometimes it must be done minute by minute. And it can be very easy for us as adults to slip into a mindset of, grasping hold of a negative character trait in response to some difficulty, right? And one of the easiest things to go back to is anger. That's one of them, right? Anger is not a negative character trait. It's just a negative emotion, but it can lead to other negative things, right? Anger is not a bad thing. It's just an emotion, right? It just needs to learn how to be governed and controlled. But another thing is retaliation, right? If someone does something to you, it's easy to entertain the thoughts of retaliation. And if you have a habit of retaliating, to a person in your mind, because of something they did, and you continuously entertain those thoughts, you know that one day, if the circumstances are right, those thoughts will eventually become actions. So this is why it's important, and we covered it in the character unit, that we carefully monitor our thoughts, right? We carefully examine those thoughts and we replace them with positive, beneficial thoughts, because it might be kind of natural for you to quickly result to return to a negative thought or retaliation when someone does something to you, especially if that was the way that you were trained to respond, okay? But now in learning to respond in a positive way, now you have to replace those hot thoughts with cool thoughts. You have to recognize the triggers, right? A trigger is something that starts a process. You have to recognize the triggers that lead to those thoughts and feelings, right? And try to intercept them before they even become something that here you're sitting and stewing over something that somebody did and how you'd like to see this bad thing take place to them in response, right? We never want to entertain anything that brings harm to ourselves, others, and the environment, okay? And it doesn't just mean the physical bringing harm to ourselves, other, and the environment, because that action, as we know, starts with a thought. So we must govern the thoughts that enter into our minds or that we choose to hold on and focus on, because those will eventually become who we are. Now it says here, in this chapter you will learn that maintaining your character, oh boy, I got the one that's cut off here. Yeah, my book here is kind of, I don't have my other character unit here. But anyway, yeah, but there's a lot more there that I'm missing. But anyway, those first two paragraphs, I should have double checked that. I have two books there. Those first two paragraphs pretty much cover what I wanted you to understand, in that we have to consistently maintain our character to make consistent choices that are respectful and compassionate towards ourselves and others, because there are going to be curveballs, there are going to be setbacks, there are going to be things that affect us. Let's look over to page 85. We'll write down page 85 in the character unit. You don't have to go there. If you don't have your book, you don't have to. But on page 85, just real quick, it says, curveballs and pitfalls are unexpected situations that can test your resolve to maintain a positive character. They come up when you least expect them and can catch you off guard. And suddenly you can find yourself in the middle of a bad scene, unprepared to deal with the situation that could lead you to making a bad choice that you will later regret. Okay? And so those are things that can be presented to us at any moment, right? But there are sometimes difficulties that people are born with, okay? Things or traits or characteristics or features that they have that they can't change, right? That's not a curveball. That's just something that they have to deal with, okay? And so us recognizing that there are difficulties in that they might be dealing with that, it kind of gives us a mindset we're going to be covering here, talking about consideration and empathy, so that we can treat them. We want to always make sure we're treating people with respect. Okay, we never want to ever lose respect for other people, irregardless of the situation or the difficulties that they might be facing. So it says here, for example, thousands of children every year are subject to physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. Others are born with birth defects, and some have learning disabilities because they were exposed to drugs and alcohol before they were born. There are those who are faced with sudden and catastrophic illnesses or accidents, and these are just a few of the problems people face within our society. Even if you have never experienced these major upheavals, you will certainly be disappointed in one way or another from time to time. Even the daily grind can wear you down unless you are constantly keeping a positive outlook on life. And that can be very, very, very difficult. Like I say, it's difficult for us as adults. How much more can it be difficult for our youth, right? And we have a lot to deal with, and we sometimes forget that, just because our youth don't have to deal with, going to work and providing for a family and paying the bills and making sure, all these things that run a family take place, it doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of things that they have to deal with on a daily basis. A lot of young people can be very, very cruel. And that's cruel, not cool, cruel, inconsiderate, unkind, disrespectful, and it seems like it's gotten even worse now in this generation, in the time period that we're in, with the onset and the abundance of social media and technology, because it makes it even easier to be unkind to people anonymously, right? You know, when we were growing up, you actually had to go and say something to a person's face, right? Or, you know, you can start a rumor about the person, or, you know, you had to write a letter, right? Nobody's going to do that nowadays. You know, they're just going to, you know, say something online, which we talk about. We don't talk about it in here because it wasn't a big thing when these books were written, but we have done classes on it in regards to cyberbullying, which is something that's very big right now. Let's look down on page 12 to the last paragraph there. It says, using the positive character trait of optimism, which is the ability to look on the bright side of any situation, as well as determination and courage, will enable you to rise above and move beyond any hardships or difficulties you might face. When you deal with the disappointments that life sometimes hands you in a positive manner and learn from them, you can build and strengthen your moral character. Accept responsibility for making a difference in your life and the lives of others. As we said, you know, in previous units, you know, should we wait for somebody else to do it? Should we wait for somebody else to help make the world a better place, or should we start taking the initiative ourselves to improve society, starting within? With determination, along with the information you can learn from in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, you can find a way to take the lemons life hands you and make lemonade. Do not allow life's challenges to get you down or cause you to lose hope. Instead, let them motivate you to succeed in reaching your full moral potential. Okay? All right, so now let's look at that here as we move forward on the page 13. Let's hold your page right there, and let's look back to the lesson plan. And we're going to go to Procedure 6 on Lesson Plan 1, page G, and Procedure 6. And it says, tell students that just as they must be willing to accept what makes them unique, they must also be willing to accept the uniqueness of others. Okay, because it's not just about a me, right? We live in a society, a collection of people that have, you know, varying likes and personality traits and characters and culture and so forth. So we have to be able to accept the uniqueness of others. Ask students how they would feel if someone were to tease or taunt them because of their facial features, size, or even the way they dress. And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the teacher to continue in building a rapport with their students, an opportunity for them to kind of voice their feelings, because I can guarantee you that is something that's going to be taking place in a school, right? Because there's always somebody in school who has less than somebody else. I guarantee you. It's just like there's always somebody in school who has more than somebody else. Now, that doesn't make the person bad or great. It just means that they have a little bit less of whatever it is, whether it's money or clothing. Some of those people are some of the kindest people that you've ever met, on both sides of the spectrum, right? That doesn't make a person's character, but sadly, a lot of young people, they judge on appearances only. And if somebody looks like they stick out from the rest of the crowd, that automatically makes them become an outcast, right? And so that's why we want to put into the minds of the student that know its character that we're learning to look at and make decisions based on, right? Not because a person doesn't have the latest pair of shoes or because they might have a couple of holes in their pants and things of that nature. Not everybody has all the same things, but the person underneath all of that, that is who is important. So discuss the words empathy and consideration in the section entitled Accepting Others, found on page 13 in their handbooks. Explain that accepting others for who they are means accepting them regardless of their physical characteristics or their circumstances. Have students turn to pages 14 and 50 of their handbooks and read the scenarios and answer the questions that follow. All right, so let's look over to page 13 here. All right. Now it says here, under accepting others, can you imagine being teased about something that you feel very sensitive about? Something that is beyond your control at this time in your life. Can you imagine what a typical day at school would be like if you felt that you were not accepted by your peers? Now remember what we covered at the very beginning of this unit, that this is a time period in a child's life where they are starting to seek acceptance outside of the home, right? This is the time period where they want to associate, they want to be a part of, their peers, okay? They're seeing people who are their same age. They see that there are a lot of similarities that they have, likes and dislikes and so forth. And so they want to be a part. It's a natural thing to want to be a part of the group, right? So imagine how a person who is excited about going out and making new friends, right? And learning about different things, different people, different cultures and so forth. Imagine them having that thought in their mind and that excitement in their heart, and then being shunned or cast aside because they look a little bit different than somebody else, or they sound a little bit different than somebody else because they have a particular accent, or they might even have like a speech impairment, right? They might speak a different way because they might have a lisp, or they might have something that makes it difficult for them to sound out their words. Imagine them being shunned by the people that they're actually looking to make friends with, right? How would that make them feel? How would that make you feel, right? Imagine your family doing that to you, and sadly, these are some of the situations that a lot of young people go through. They look for acceptance. They should be accepted within their own family, but they're not. So they start looking for acceptance outside the family, and sometimes people don't accept them there. And so what occurs is they'll take whatever they can get. And sometimes that's the wrong crowd, right? Because they'll tend to prey on people who are considered social outcasts, and they'll start running with, these gangs and things of that nature, and they get into a lot of mischief because you've got a group of people who feel that they're outcasts. Nobody likes them, nobody appreciates them, nobody wants them around, so they take all that internalized aggression and they displace it on everyone and everything that they can come into contact with, right? So it's important that we help to make people feel appreciated. Okay, that's the point I'm wanting to make. For many young people or young adults, this is a reality. They must deal with the lack of acceptance on a daily basis. Every day, teens just like you are teased and humiliated because others have not learned the moral principles of treating others with care and concern. The moral principles. Remember what we see there in those words, moral principles. These are rules that govern healthy, beneficial, positive human interactions, right? And the moral principle that this is referring to here is the one of respect, which we covered at the very first chapter in the character unit. It says, accepting others means deciding to treat them the way you would like to be treated, or as the old rule that they say, the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. I just wanted to read some statistics here in regards to bullying, because that's in effect what we're talking about here, and we're going to get into bullying here a little bit later in the following chapters. But this is what people go through, when they're teased and they're humiliated because other people have not learned these moral principles of respect. This falls into the category of bullying, which is also a form of disrespect. When you're not showing respect to someone in your interactions, whether you're doing it on purpose or unintentionally, it falls into a category of disrespect. Well, here, this is from stopbullying.gov, and the question was, the heading is, how common is bullying? All right, and their statistics, I believe this was showing from 2019. It says about 20% of students ages 12 through 18 experienced bullying nationwide. Now, one thing we have to take into consideration with these studies are the amount of people that they interviewed and the amount of people who were willing to actually express that they were bullied, right? There are a lot of people who aren't interviewed, and so that doesn't mean that they're not bullied, you know. So it's not just like this is a solid number, but this is just kind of a general roundabout number based on the amount of people that they surveyed. Cyberbullying, which is something that we talked about, and like I said, and when this book was written, you know, cyberbullying wasn't really a thing. I mean, there were computers and chat rooms and things like that, but it's way worse now, you know, than what it was back 20-something years ago, right? You know, because everybody has a Facebook account, almost everybody. Most children have Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts and, you know, all these other different accounts that you know, things that most parents, a lot of parents don't even know of, that they're on these things. And they use these forms of social media to show disrespect to others. They'll even start groups. I've seen where a group of bullies will start a page that's made just to harass another particular student or to bully another student, okay? And now, you know, they're trying to crack down on it and curb it because, you know, there have been a lot of young people that have actually taken their life as a result of cyberbullying. You know, one of the things that contributed to their, you know, their committing of suicide or lashing out in retaliation to being bullied. And so, you know, social media and society is trying to crack down and take those things off, but there's always a back channel where people will find a way to show disrespect to other people. But it says among students ages 12 through 18 who reported being bullied at school during the school year, 15% were bullied online or by text. Okay, and that's not something that necessarily stops when the bell rings or, you know, school lets out for summer vacation. No, this type of bullying, this cyberbullying, can take place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay. And so this is something that we have to keep in mind as well. And this is also, you know, from a parent's standpoint, you know, why we need to kind of monitor the things that our children are doing, especially in the age of social media. And, you know, if a 10 or 12-year-old has a cell phone for whatever reason, you know, kind of keep tabs on it to make sure that they're not hiding something that they're going through. Because a lot of times, sadly, not always do the children say something to their parents about it, right? Or any trusted adult, and they kind of try to deal with it on their own, and they make some bad choices. But this is where, being a parent or teacher, sometimes you look for telltale signs and you work on, you know, trying to help that person and intervene in their life to try to work out what the problems are and direct them towards the right path of making right decisions. From international statistics, according to UNESCO Institute of Statistics, it says 1/3 of the globe's youth is bullied. This ranges from as low as 7% in Tajikistan, which I guess from their studies they found that there was the least amount of bullying there, to 74% in Samoa. All right. Low socioeconomic status is the main factor in youth bullying within wealthy countries. You know, this is a statistic that was given. I tend to disagree with that. You know, low character education is the main factor in bullying within any country. Okay, irregardless of how much money you have, although sometimes people do look down on people who have less money, but they had to be taught that. You know, they had to be taught that because I have a certain standard of life and you don't, you're less than me. Because who would normally think that, right? I mean, when you think of children who grow up, you know, in a fairly comfortable lifestyle where their parents, you know, they work and they are able to provide everything they need and maybe a little bit more, you know, and they go out on the playground and they play with a child who might come from a family that doesn't have very much, right? And they can barely afford to keep food on the table and a roof over their child's head. When both of those children are out there and you know, on the playground or in the field, you know, they're just having a great time with their friend, with their peer. You know, they're not looking at the fact that this person is poorer than me or this person is wealthier than me. No, this is just somebody that I enjoy having a great time with. So these things are things that have to be taught to a person. You have to be taught to look down on somebody else just because of their social economic status in life. And it's something that sadly society teaches even through movies, entertainment, music, and so forth. Immigrant-born youth in wealthy countries are more likely to be bullied than locally born youth. And it says research indicates that persistent bullying can lead to or worsen feelings of isolation, rejection, exclusion, and despair, as well as depression and anxiety, which can contribute to suicidal behavior. Okay, and these are things that can add to influences that can add to a person's thoughts if they're focusing on and feeding those negative thoughts instead of replacing them with positive thoughts, right? Then they'll eventually make very poor choices as a result. So let's look back over to page 13. Well, you're already there. In the second paragraph, it says, accepting others means deciding to treat them the way you would like to be treated. It means putting yourself in their shoes and asking yourself, now this is metaphorically speaking, this is an analogy, young people don't go take other people's shoes and step in them, but, put yourself, in your mind in that person's shoes. Put yourself in that person's situation, right? Imagine what it would be like to go through what they're going through, okay? And this is what we're talking about, empathy here. How would I feel, by asking yourself here, how would I feel if someone treated me this way or made fun of me? Okay, and this is when a person gets an opportunity to reflect on that if possibly they are a part of a group that's doing the bullying, right? Or they're witnessing someone being outcast or shunned because they look a little bit different, or they're from a different place, or they sound a little bit different, or maybe they smell a little bit different, right? This gives the students an opportunity to think to themselves, well, how would that make me feel if I was going through something like that? And it starting the process. Now, not just that alone, taking what we're learning from the Peaceful Solution, coupled with that, right? So that they can start the process of kind of befriending that person, helping that person to see the value in themselves, to showing respect to that person who is being disrespected by others. The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is called empathy. Having empathy is an important part of accepting and having consideration for others. And when you think about you see here in the little side box there, the word empathy over to the right of the paragraph, consideration and empathy. Consideration is to be thoughtful of others, and empathy means to understand how others feel. Now, sometimes people confuse empathy with sympathy, okay? Because they kind of sound similar, they kind of seem like they would be interchangeable. But in the Peaceful Solution, you'll see that we talk about having empathy for others, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. The word empathy, it's from the two words em or m, which means in, and the word pathos, which means path or meaning feelings. It means understanding and entering into another's feelings, right? Not like you're invading their feelings, but, like we just read, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to see how you would feel if you were in their situation, if you were faced with the same curveballs and pitfalls and trials and adversities that person is going through. Now, sympathy, on the other hand, it's a noun meaning sharing the feelings of others, especially feelings of sorrow or anguish. And then here it says the difference between empathy and sympathy. Empathy is heartbreaking. In other words, you experience other people's pain and joy. Whereas sympathy is easier because you just have to feel sorry for someone. Send a sympathy card if someone's cat died, or you can feel empathy if your cat died too. That's the example that they give. You know what that person's going through because you can empathize with them. You've suffered, your cat being traumatized, or you suffered being bullied, right? Or you suffered being disrespected in some way or embarrassed in some way. So you know what that person's going through. And also, in addition to that word consideration there, it simply means giving much thought before acting, right? Giving much thought before acting. That word consideration is from the word consider, and it means to think about something or someone carefully, especially in order to make a choice or decision. Now, think about what we're learning in the peaceful solution, right? We're learning how to control our thoughts, feelings, and actions in order to bring about a peaceful solution, right? So it's important that we very carefully think before we act in any situation, right? We don't want to just impulsively say or do something, even in a person's zeal in dealing with, somebody who might be bullied or being bullied. They can make some impulsive, rash choices where they, in effect, show the same disrespect to the bullies that the bully might be showing to that individual. So it's necessary that we stop and we collect our thoughts. We think about things. And I experienced something earlier in the week where, it was kind of unexpected, in interacting with somebody, and I'm a very non-confrontational type of person. I don't like conflict at all. And so, when this was presented to me, right away, my mind, my body goes into fight or flight mode. Now I'm not, running around and sweating and everything, but internally, I know what's getting ready to take place. My mind recognized the conflict, right? And so, immediately I have to bring all these thoughts into subjection in order to respond in a way that won't escalate the situation, because obviously the person that I'm dealing with is very upset with something, and for some reason I got caught in the crossfire, right? And so it would be very easy to lash out and retaliate, and say, hey, you better watch who you're talking to, but what will that do? In most cases, that'll just make the situation worse, because if you're dealing with a person who's already upset, and they're displacing it on you, and if you respond to them in that way, then they're going to take it up a notch, right? Like old Emeril Lagasse, take it up a notch, right? But our job as teachers of the peaceful solution is to de-escalate situations like this, to bring that hot boiling pot down to a simmer, and eventually, get that fire turned off so that it can cool down and be easy to handle. Now we can't control that person, but we can control how we respond. And even in dealing with the situation, we'll get much more into bullying a lot later, but this is a little bit about what it's talking about here, what these things lead to. We have to be careful how we respond to a person who is bullying. We never want to show disrespect, even in responding to a bullying, because responding to disrespect with more disrespect, as we're going to learn, it only adds more fuel to the fire. So, in continuing on with this definition of consideration from the word consider, it says to think about something that is important in understanding something or in making a decision or judgment. To think about a person or a person's feelings before you do something in order to avoid making someone upset, angry, and etc. Okay, so when we consider or have consideration for others, we have to go through the process of thinking. We have to go through the process of thinking not only about that person, but how we should respond or interact with that person. Okay, because the decision that we make on how we interact with them is going to make can make their situation better or worse. And of course, we don't want to make it any worse. That last paragraph there says, accepting others means understanding that they too have circumstances that are beyond their control, as well as positive traits and abilities. If you just hold your place right there, let's see what we got. How much? Okay, hold your place right there, and let's look back to pages 2 and 3. Accepting others means understanding that they too have circumstances that are beyond their control. They too. Why they too. Why does it say they too? Let's look at page 2. At the top there, it says others count too. Here's something else to consider. Each person is just important as you are. Right? They have what? Circumstances that are beyond their control. That they too have these circumstances that are beyond their control, as well as positive traits and ability. Now, we just got finished learning that there are circumstances that are going to be on our control that we have to learn to accept and deal with in a positive way. Well, why would it be any different for anybody else? Right? And this is something that we have to help, a lot of our young people understand, because I don't think a lot of young people do it on purpose, but I think it's just the way maybe their brains are wired until they get a little bit older. But they tend to kind of focus on what's directly in their bubble, so to speak. What's directly in their immediate environment. And they stop and they don't necessarily stop and consider that other people might be going through difficulties or hardships or facing, things that might make life a little bit of a challenge, okay? So it's important that each person is just as important as you are. This means that you learn to accept your life as worthwhile. Remember that so are the lives of others. That is, it's worthwhile. Now, this is called tolerance, and it is an important part of acceptance. Now, if you look over to page 3 there, under accepting me, accepting you, under introduction, it says, acceptance as presented in this unit of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program means to willingly acknowledge the positive character traits about yourself and others. Acceptance means understanding that there are aspects of your life that you can and cannot change. And, and what we're talking about, some of these things that people go through on page 13, these are some of the things that they don't have any ability to change. As we covered in the previous units here on page, not previous units, previous pages, 5 and 6 and 7 and so forth, our physical traits, they're not something that are necessarily permanent. Now, when I say they're not necessarily permanent, I mean, as a parent, you can look at your child from the time that they were born, and after they're first born, they kind of look like a raisin, and their face is all squished up and wrinkly. They're all waterlogged, and in a matter of 7 days, it's almost like their appearance totally changes. And then in a matter of 3 months, their features have changed even more. Well, then by the time they're a teenager, they look almost completely different than what they did when they were first born. Well, as they get older in their 20s and 30s and 40s, their bodies, their faces, their features continue to change. And then by the time, they're in their 60s and 70s and 80s, they look almost completely different. Now, if you've been around them and you've known them all their life, it's kind of a slow, gradual process, and you see that change taking place. You're growing with them, so it's not as sudden. But if anybody saw them, 20, 30 years ago, they might almost not recognize them unless it was a particular feature about them that they do remember. So, a person's not permanently going to be in the condition physically that they are, when they're an adolescent. They're going to grow out of the acne. They're going to grow out of the scratchy voice. They're going to grow out of the lankiness or whatever they might feel that they're going through. And even if they don't, those things aren't important in regards to what we're talking about here in building and maintaining a positive character. Look at the bottom paragraph there on page 3. It says, accepting yourself means realizing that you are a unique human being and that your ability to make a difference in your life and the lives of others depends only on the amount of time and effort you put forth in your studies. Okay? And so, going back and reading that, we want to remind the students that must reflect also in how they interact with their peers, right? Accepting, things about people that there are circumstances that they might not be able to change, right? And helping them to realize that as well. And that's what a friend will do. They'll help you to realize, well, hey, listen, as you see the example in the picture down there, the young man might be in a wheelchair, but, they're very honest. They're very compassionate. They're trustworthy and they're loyal and so forth, right? And that's what we should look at. Always accentuate the positive, right? Always look for the positive in the person, because I'm telling you, If a person goes out always looking for the bad in somebody, I guarantee you 100% of the time, that person's going to find it. It doesn't matter how great of a person that the other guy is. If a person's mindset is focused on pessimism and finding the bad in someone, they're always going to find something. Okay, but we want to focus on the positive, right? We want to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative, because we all have negative characteristics, right? And we don't like if people are all the time pointing those things out to us, right? We appreciate knowing, if we didn't know that we had a negative characteristic, what we might be doing wrong, so now that we can work on changing it. But always focus on the positive. It says here, it means accepting them. Did I read that? Let me start at the beginning of that last paragraph. Accepting others means understanding that they too have circumstances that are beyond their control, as well as positive traits and abilities. It means accepting them regardless of their nationality, that is where they're from, or ethnicity, their culture and religion. Accepting others does not mean condoning actions and attitudes that are negative, disrespectful, or immoral. I was going to say something about that. Let's just finish here. Nor does it mean agreeing with someone who is wrong, even if he is your friend. Okay, and this ties back into peer pressure, right? Because it could be very easy to want to just agree with your friend because he's your friend, but you know that he's wrong, right? And if a person has value for themselves, if they have value for their friends, they're not going to agree with and accept negative behavior. They're not going to condone negative or immoral behaviors, right? Because what will that do to the person who is practicing them? It's going to strengthen their hand. It's going to give them in their mind the support that they need to continue to be disrespectful or continue to be immoral. Why? Because now they think they've got their friends have got their back, right? No, a true friend needs to stand up and say, "No, man, that's not true," or "No, that's not moral. That's very dishonest. Why? That's me. Why would you say something to a person like that? It's very disrespectful." That's what a true friend would do. Accepting others simply means treating them with the same respect, empathy, and consideration that you would want to be treated with. And this word here, I think we covered it in the previous classes here, but that circumstances is merely a sum of essential and environmental factors, as of an event or situation. It's a fact or event that makes a situation the way it is, right? The fact that a person might have had a defect when they were born, so now they have to be in a wheelchair. So that's the situation that they're in, right? It also means the origin of the word circumstance is from circum, which means around, and stare, which means stand. It simply means a person's environment or a person's surroundings, right? And sometimes your environment, not necessarily physically, but mentally and so forth, can affect your circumstances, right? For example, if your parents don't generate a lot of income, or there's a reason why they can't generate a lot of income, or your circumstances might be that you might only be able to eat one meal a day, okay? Or you might not be able to afford the latest clothes, or you might only be able, their parents might only be able to afford, to hand down a pair of shoes instead of buying you the latest pair that always comes out, right? And that doesn't necessarily always mean a bad thing or a negative thing. That's just a fact of how things are. And it was interesting because, I think I'll wait till we get to a little bit further in the classes, because it'll tie more into some of the things that we're going to talk about when we get into the next unit on self-control. So I'll save this little tidbit of info there. But it's important to help the students to understand that irregardless of the differences that they're going to see in their peers on a daily basis, and even if it's not people that they might be going to school with, it might just be somebody in their neighborhood or somebody that they might randomly see on the streets. It's important that they understand that even if they don't know that person has value, and I should always treat them with the utmost respect, right? And this be a very beneficial contribution to society by, at the very least, not doing something to make it worse. At the very least, not doing something to ruin that person's day. But at the very least, showing the other person that they do have value, and that can be shown through the student who is learning the peaceful solutions, words and actions. So we're going to stop here on page 13, and we'll pick up next class with the next teacher on 7/11, which is Sunday 7/11. How convenient. At 5:30 Central Standard Time. Thank you all for joining this class, and we look forward to seeing you next class. Have a wonderful evening.